There's something that happens when you find a manhwa nobody told you about. You stumble into it by accident, you read the first chapter expecting nothing, and then somewhere around chapter 3 or 4 you put your phone down and just sit there for a second. Because you weren't prepared for it to be that good. That happens more than people talk about. The manhwa community spends a lot of time on the same 10 titles, and look, they deserve it. But there's an entire world of stories sitting just underneath that conversation that most people will never find. Today we're fixing that. These are 5 manhwa that I genuinely believe deserve to be in the same conversation as the greats. And if even one of them changes how you think about this medium, then this video did its job. Starting at number 5, The Lazy Lord Masters the Sword. And I want to be careful about how I describe this one, because the premise sounds like something you've read 100 times. Depressed nobleman, dream mentor, sword training, redemption arc. You've seen that, I know. But what separates this manhwa from everything that superficially resembles it is the emotional honesty of how it handles depression. Aaron Ferreira doesn't just happen to be sad before he finds his purpose. His depression is drawn with a weight and a specificity that most manhwa, most stories in any medium, don't bother with. The way he moves through the world before his transformation, the way other characters react to him, the shame layered into every interaction. This is a manhwa that understands that healing isn't a montage. It's slow and non-linear, and sometimes it looks like nothing is happening when actually everything is. The sword training is satisfying, genuinely, but it earns that satisfaction in a way that requires patience. And that patience is entirely worth it. Number 4, Academy's Undercover Professor. Here's what I think is happening with this one. It doesn't fit neatly into any single category, and the manhwa community hasn't quite figured out how to talk about it. Is it action? Is it mystery? Is it a found family story set inside a magic school? It's all of those things simultaneously, and it executes all of them with a confidence that should be getting significantly more attention. Luger Cherish has been living under false identities for over a decade. An expert in espionage and manipulation who ends up embedded in an elite magical academy. And what develops from that premise is one of the most genuinely intelligent ongoing manhwa I've come across. The world building is intricate without being exhausting. The characters have actual interior lives. And Luger himself, the way he navigates the line between his cover and whatever it is he actually feels, is the kind of character study that you think about between chapters. Underrated in the truest sense. Not flawed, just undiscovered. Number 3, Teenage Mercenary. And this one is interesting because it actually has a devoted readership. So in some ways, calling it underrated feels almost unfair. But I'd argue that the conversation around it consistently undersells what it actually is. Yui Jin lost his parents in a plane crash at 9 years old. Stranded in a foreign country, his memory gone, he was taken in and turned into a child soldier. He spent years in conditions that should have destroyed him, and then his memory came back. And he came home. To a high school in Korea. What Teenage Mercenary understands, what it gets exactly right, is the specific, quiet alienation of someone who has survived things that nobody around them can comprehend. The gap between Yui Jin's interior world and the world he now has to navigate isn't played for cool factor. It's played with genuine emotional intelligence. There's a scene early in the series, I won't describe it, where you understand exactly who he is and exactly what it cost him to become that person. And from that point, you're not watching an action manhwa. You're watching a portrait of someone trying to remember how to be human. The action is excellent, but that's not why this series matters. Number 2, SSS-Class Suicide Hunter. And look, I know some of you have heard of this one, but the number of people who have actually read it compared to the number who should have read it is a gap I find genuinely baffling. Kim Gong-ja starts the story as what you might generously describe as completely unremarkable. He watches powerful hunters from a distance. He has no meaningful abilities. He wants to be great and has no particular reason to believe he ever will be. And then he gets a skill. A skill that copies the power of whoever kills him. He immediately gets killed by the most powerful hunter alive, and what follows is one of the most structurally inventive power fantasy narratives in manhwa. But, and this is important, it is so much more than a power fantasy. The time regression mechanic forces Kim Gong-ja to live through the same events repeatedly in ways that accumulate genuine emotional weight. He doesn't just get stronger, He grieves. He fails people he couldn't save the first time. He carries the specific loneliness of someone who has lived through versions of the world that no one else remembers. SSS-Class Suicide Hunter is a manhwa about power, yes, but it is more accurately a manhwa about what repeated loss does to a person. And it does that with a literary seriousness that this medium rarely reaches for.
And number 1, surviving romance.
I want to say something about this manhwa that I think doesn't get said enough. It is one of the most formally inventive stories I've encountered in this medium. Full stop. Chaerin-yoon, or more precisely, the woman who wakes up inside a character named Chaerin-yoon, finds herself trapped inside a romance novel that has gone catastrophically wrong. The genre has shifted without warning. The love interest is a zombie. And every time she dies, she wakes up at the beginning of the same day. Now, a lesser story would use that premise as a backdrop for a survival thriller. Surviving romance uses it as a lens for examining something far more uncomfortable. The way Chaerin initially relates to the people around her, treating them as background characters, as narrative furniture, and the long, difficult process of being forced to see them as human beings with their own inner lives. This is a manhwa about what it means to stop being the protagonist of your own story. About empathy as a skill that has to be actively learned, and sometimes painfully unlearned and relearned. The zombie horror is genuinely terrifying. The romance is genuinely moving. But what surviving romance is actually doing, underneath all of it, is asking a question that very few stories in any genre have the courage to ask seriously. And it answers that question in a way that I still think about. Number 1, not a competition. 5 manhwa, 5 stories that deserved a larger stage than they got. If you've read any of these, or if one of them just moved up your reading list, let me know in the comments. And if there's a manhwa you think belongs on this list that we didn't mention, I genuinely want to know. Subscribe to 0 Chapter Left.